Okay, this is part 2 of something that seems to support my interpretation of Quran 36, 40-43, which to me is talking about the sun and moon not only being our parents, but riding in vehicles. In Quran 36, 40-43, it sounds like arks, similar to what Noah rode in, the offspring of the sun and moon. However, from this hadith that I discovered that it's not arks but chariots. And I'll read it to you, and this is a continuation from, this is part 2, but this is a continuation from part 1. Okay, Ibn Abbas had been reclining, sat up and asked what it was. The man said, he suggested that on the day of resurrection the sun and moon will be brought as if they were 2 hamstrung oxen and flung into hell. Ikrimah continued. Ibn Abbas became contorted with anger and exclaimed 3 times, Ka'b is a liar! Ka'b is lying! Ka'b is lying! Ka'b is lying! This is something Jewish he wants to inject into Islam. Allah is too majestic and noble to mete out punishment where there is obedience to him. Have you not heard Allah's word? Quote, he subjected to you the sun and moon being constant, referring to the constant obedience. How would he punish 2 servants that are praised and for constant obedience? May Allah curse the rabbi and his rabbinate. How insolent is he toward Allah, and what a tremendous replication has he told about those 2 servants, the sun and moon, that are obedient to Allah. He continued. Then he said several times, we return to Allah. He took a little piece of wood from the ground and started to hit the ground with it. He did that for some time, then lifted his head and threw away the little piece of wood and said, you want me to tell you what I heard the Messenger of Allah say about the sun and moon and the beginning of their creation and how things went with them? We said, we would indeed. May Allah show mercy unto you. He said, when the Messenger of Allah was asked about that, he replied, when Allah was done with his creation and only Adam remained to be created, he that's Allah, created 2 sons from the light of his throne. His foreknowledge told him, that's Allah, he would leave here 1 son. So he created it as large as this world is from east to west. In other words, he made the sun as big as the planet Earth. His foreknowledge also told him that he would efface it and change it to a moon. So the moon is smaller in size than the sun. But both are seen as small because of the sun's altitude and remoteness from the earth. Well, that's kind of scientific, I'd say. He continued, if Allah left the 2 suns as he created them in the beginning, night would not have been distinguishable from day. A hired man then would not know until when he should labor and when he should receive his wages. A person fasting would not know until when he must fast. A woman would not know how to reckon the period of her impurity. The Muslims would not know the time of the pilgrimage. Debtors would not know when their debtors became due. People in general would not know when to work or for their livelihood and when to stop for resting their bodies. The Lord was too concerned for his servants and too merciful to them to do such a thing. He thus sent Gabriel, that's Jibril, to drag his wing 3 times over the face of the moon, which at the time was a sun. So the moon used to be a sun according to Islam. He effaced its luminosity and left the light in it. This is meant by Allah's word, quote, and we have made the night and the day 2 signs. We have blotted out the sign of the night, and we have made the sign of the day something to see by. He continued, the blackness you can see as lines on the moon is a trace of the blotting. Allah has created for the sun a chariot with 360 handholds from the luminosity of the light of the throne, and entrusted 360 of the angels inhabiting the lower heaven with the sun and its chariot, each of them gripping one of those handholds. He trusted 360 of the angels inhabiting the lower, inhabiting the lower heaven with the moon and its chariot, each of them gripping one of the handholds. So there you go. So the moon is traveling in the lower heaven, which is the Earth's atmosphere, according to some Muslims. Then he said, for the sun and moon, he, that's Allah, created easts and wests, positions to rise and set, on two sides of the earth and the two rims of heaven, 180 springs in the west of black clay. This is meant by Allah's word, quote, he found it setting in a muddy spring, unquote, meaning by muddy, hamia, black clay, and 180 springs in the east likewise of black clay, bubbling and boiling like a pot when it boiled furiously. It's boiling and bubbling because the sun is in it, apparently. He continued, every day and night the sun has a new place where it rises and a new place where it sets. Kind of does not go along with the idea that the earth is rotating. The interval between them from beginning to end is longest for the day in summer and shortest in winter. This is meant by Allah's word, quote, the Lord of the two easts and the Lord of the two wests, meaning the last position of the sun here and the last there. He omitted the positions in the east and west for the rising and setting of the sun between them. Then he referred to the east and west in the plural, saying, quote, by the Lord of the easts and wests, unquote. He mentioned the number of all those springs as above. He continued, Allah created an ocean 3 farsakhs, 18 kilometers, removed from heaven. Waves contained. Now this is going to get the idea of the notion, supporting my belief, or from my interpretation of the Quran, that there is an ocean of water above the earth. That's where it's a part of this. It's like a part of the sphere. Well, it is the ocean of water is actually a sphere around the earth, and it's made out of water, and the sun and the moon swim in it. Waves contained. It stands in the air by the command of Allah. No drop of it spilled. All the oceans are motionless, but the ocean flows in the rate of the speed of an arrow. So it's motionless, yet it is flowing at the rate of the speed of an arrow going around the earth. It is set free to move in the air evenly, as if it were a rope stretched out of the area between east and west. The sun and moon and the retrograde stars. Muhammad believed the retrograde stars. Well, believe that the planets were the retrograde stars, and I'll tell you why later on here. I'll read it to you here. The sun and the moon and the retrograde stars run its deep swell. This is meant by Allah's word, quote, each swims in a sphere, unquote. The, quote, sphere, that's a ball that circles around the earth, is the circulation of the chariot in the deep swell of that ocean. I tell you, it doesn't match what we see of astronomy today, that's for sure. By him, that's Allah, who holds the soul of Muhammad in his hand. It is the sun where, if the sun were to emerge from that ocean, it would burn everything on earth, including even rocks and stones. And if the moon were to emerge from it, it would afflict by its heat the inhabitants of the earth to such an extent that they would worship gods other than Allah. The exception would be those of Allah's friends whom Allah, would want to keep free from sin. In other words, you get the idea that Allah is the one that gives you your belief to believe in Him. Yeah, takes away that notion of free will here for sure. Ibn Abbas said, quote, Ali B. Abi. I've got to stop here. I'll continue later on chapter in part 3 coming up. Bye.